it's been very clear over at least past couple of days that the Conservative establishment, and especially their heavy PR machine, is determined to try and turn Johnson into some sort of hero during this time of crisis. Unfortunately, well, or not, as is the case, Johnson is a complete idiot and buffoon, and his government has well and truly dropped the ball. Remember, they've been in power for the past decade. A lot of the stuff that's going on is directly because of the policies that they have had in place, and because Johnson, as himself, when he was put in power to make these important decisions, to quote, of all people, Jared Kushner, because he came out and said this in America, when you elect a politician, one of the reasons you want them to be there is, or one of the criteria you're really judging them on, is how you want them to be in a crisis. And Johnson has just not done anything during this crisis. He's dithered and delayed, and as a result, we are on track to be the worst affected country by the coronavirus, in Europe. When only he had to go back to 2009, and the World Health Organization had said that we were the most prepared nation to take on such a potential pandemic. So, this comes from the Daily Record. So, we've reached the point in the lockdown where idiocy has become something of Olympic sport. Let's take this week's King of the Idiots, Stanley Johnson, father of our beloved and besieged Prime Minister. As Boris Johnson was moved out of intensive care, his old dad came out and said that he'd nearly taken one for the team, and that his son's illness got the whole country to realise this is a serious thing. By the way, he said this from the Johnson family's second home on Exmoor, where he'd gone for Easter, so his son should probably have had him arrested for non-essential travel this weekend, or he should at least lose his job like the Scottish CMO Catherine Cedarwood. Oh wait, he doesn't have a job. First of all, the only thing Johnson would take for the team would be the kitty of the drinks after the five-a-side, which he'd then pocket before buggering off home entirely. And secondly, no, Stanley, you're a daft old half-wit father of a blonde turd in a suit. It didn't make us realise it was serious, because those of us with IQ over 80 already knew that. Because we could read newspapers and watch TV and see tens of thousands of people dying in other countries, we were able to say, this looks pretty serious. The only people who weren't taking it seriously 3 weeks ago were total utter fools. Fools like Stanley Johnson. In an interview on March 17th, when the people were already dying across the UK, Boris Johnson's dad said, "Of course I'll still go to the pub if I need to go to the pub." Obviously, this was after his son's government had advised people not to visit pubs and restaurants. But Stanley's 79 and a member of 2 unique groups, those old enough to be really at risk from the virus and those daft enough to think that the problem is a load of old rubbish. It literally took his own son almost dying to convince old Stan that this was a real thing. Where else would he have to learn from such a harsh, bitter experience before he accepts it is real? Sticking your face in a fire is a bad idea. Don't eat the yellow snow. It's best to take your trousers and pants down before you go to the toilet. A nation waits with bated breath. But the Tory party, being the Tory party, basically now a Jeffrey Archer novel rewritten with someone with ADD and Tourette's, Stanley Johnson's statement wasn't even close to the most outrageous example of idiocy this week. Step forward Dominic Raab, who gave his first interview as acting PM, sweating bullets and starting to look staring with such a crazy intensity, he looked like a man who had just finished burying a body under his patio when the police rang the doorbell. On Thursday, Raab managed to say, with a straight face, that we now know who the key workers really are. That's the same Dominic Raab who recently voted against pay rises for nurses and who wrote the book called Britannia Unchained. For those of you who watched this channel before, multiple times this book comes up. And it's something we should absolutely definitely be worried about, by the way. There is, I can't remember the guy's name now. But yeah, if you look at Britannia, I think it's YouTube it, Britannia Unchained Uncovered, and there's a guy who goes through the entire book, chapter by chapter, explaining exactly what the Tory party want to do to this country. So, he wrote a book called Britannia Unchained, in which he described the British workers as being amongst the worst idlers in the world. Like Stanley Johnson, it took his friend almost dying and the entire country being on lockdown for this clown to realise, oh wait a minute, it seems that doctors and nurses and the people who work in supermarkets are actually kind of essential to society. Wow, who knew? Well, we all certainly did. But Boris Johnson didn't die. I'm writing this on Friday morning, so who knows what will unfold over the next 48 hours. But if I was a gambling man, which I am, I'd be willing to bet that Johnson will emerge victorious from the hospital over the Easter weekend, and that the sub-editors of the right-wing press will go into hyperdrive with headlines about "He is risen" and the Easter miracle. Well, he was absolutely completely right. Especially for the Daily Mail. In fact, I'm pretty sure the Daily Mail's headline was "It's an Easter miracle." And all the rest of that guff. Johnson will be praised as a hero rather than what he is. Someone who just a few weeks ago was listening to an advisor who was telling him about herd immunity and saying, who cares if a few old people die? Someone who was boasting about going around hospitals and shaking hands long after he knew this kind of behaviour was dangerously stupid. Someone who dithered and delayed for 3 weeks and constantly put the UK on course to have the highest coronavirus death toll in Europe. We can't and we should not call people like this heroes. We call them what they are, idiots. And yeah, I'm still on course that after all this is over, there should be an open and public inquiry into just what the hell went wrong. How did we go from being a country designated by the WTO, or not the WTO, the World Health Organization, the WHO, shall we say, from being the most prepared for a flu pandemic to acting like this? What went wrong? There must be an open investigation into this, because this isn't just something that we should do to punish the Tories or anything like that. It goes beyond this. This is just something that we need to do so that we make sure if this ever happens again that we do not repeat the same mistakes. Now, ultimately, this report will find that the Tories are comparable for their austerity measures, especially against the NHS, and it's already come out several times that even back in 2016, it showed the country was completely and woefully unprepared for this. They did nothing further to prepare. We know that the organisation that was helping the government to prepare, when it said, this is what you need, the government came back and said, can you make it a bit cheaper? Yeah. This is not a government we should be handing responsibility like this to run this country. They've shown that they can't run a country at all, let alone even possibly run a bath. And I suspect Johnson has someone else to do that for him.